the vast darkness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like waves on cosmic shores, there exists a tale that sends shivers through the most hardened alien warriors. It's whispered in the taverns of Kepler Station, debated in the war councils of the Galactic Senate, and taught as both cautionary tale and inspiration in military academies across 17 different star systems. They called it the Deathworlder fleet, a name that struck fear into the hearts of pirates, slavers, and tyrants throughout the galaxy. But this isn't just another story of human military might. This is the story of how a ragtag group of misfits, outcasts, and survivors became something more than legend. They became hope itself. When the Zaltari Dominion declared humans an extinct species and began their systematic genocide across the Outer Rim colonies, the galaxy watched in silence. When entire worlds burned under their plasma bombardments, the civilized species turned their backs, calling it natural selection and the strong consuming the weak. When human children were sold in slave markets and human settlements became hunting grounds for alien predators, the Galactic Council voted to remain neutral in internal conflicts. But they underestimated something fundamental about humanity. We don't just survive extinction, we thrive in it, we adapt, we evolve. And when pushed to the very edge of annihilation, we become something the galaxy has never seen before. This is the story of Captain Sarah Chen and her crew of survivors who refused to die quietly. This is the story of how they took broken ships, desperate refugees, and the burning fury of a species on the brink, and forged them into a force that would reshape the very balance of power in the galaxy. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. They thought wrong. Some legends are born in victory, others are born in the ashes of defeat. But the greatest legends? They're born when a species has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Welcome to the story of how Earth's children became the galaxy's most feared protectors, one impossible battle at a time. The recycled air tasted like metal and desperation. Aboard the cargo hauler Resilience, as Captain Sarah Chen stared at the tactical display showing 17 red dots closing in on their position. Each dot represented a Zaltari interceptor, each one capable of reducing her converted freighter to scrap metal in minutes. Behind her, 347 human refugees huddled in what had once been storage compartments, their faces bearing the hollow look of people who had watched their worlds burn. "Captain, they're hailing us," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the communications station, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Webb had been a traffic controller on New Sydney, before the Zaltari turned that bustling colony world into a crater. Now he was Chen's communications officer, one of the few trained personnel among their ragtag crew of survivors. Sarah's jaw tightened as she considered their options. The Resilience was a tough old bird, a modified Constellation-class freighter that had seen better decades, but she wasn't built for combat. Her shields were commercial grade, her weapons were aftermarket additions that technically violated half a dozen galactic treaties, and her engines were held together with determination and recycled parts. Against 17 military interceptors, they didn't stand a chance in a straight fight. "Put them through," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the authority that had kept her crew alive through 6 months of running from sector to sector, always one step ahead of the hunting packs that the Zaltari Dominion sent after human survivors. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the angular features and golden skin of Commander Zektar, a Zaltari officer whose reputation for cruelty preceded him across the Outer Rim territories. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated skull, fixed on Sarah with predatory intensity. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship gleamed with the polished efficiency of a species that had conquered 47 star systems in the past century. "Human vessel," Zektar's voice came through the speakers with the distinctive harmonic undertones of his species. "You will surrender immediately. Your cargo of breeding stock will be processed according to Dominion regulations. Resistance will result in immediate termination." Sarah felt her crew tense around her. The bridge of the Resilience was cramped compared to military vessels, with jury-rigged consoles and mismatched equipment creating a maze of cables and blinking lights. But every person here had chosen to fight rather than surrender, to risk everything for the chance that humanity might survive what the galaxy had labeled as inevitable extinction. "I have a counter-proposal, Commander," Sarah replied, keeping her voice calm and professional. "You and your ships turn around and leave this sector, and I won't have to demonstrate why humans earned the designation Deathworlders." Zektar's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "Deathworlders? Your species is extinct in all but name, human. Your homeworld is ash, your colonies are ruins, and your survivors are scattered like dust in the void. What could possibly make you think you have any leverage in this situation?" The tactical display updated, showing the Zaltari ships moving into attack formation. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities, calculating vectors and distances, weapon ranges and shield capacities. The numbers weren't good. They weren't even close to good. But Sarah Chen hadn't survived the destruction of Earth's colonial fleet by accepting bad odds. Mr. Petrov, she called to the engineering station, where a stocky Russian with grease-stained coveralls was nursing a cup of something that might charitably be called coffee. How's our little surprise package looking? Dmitry Petrov had been the chief engineer on a Titan-class battlecruiser before the Zalhati caught the human fleet in the Vega system and turned it into scrap metal and corpses. Now he was the heart and soul of the Resilience's engine room, a man who could make broken technology sing battle hymns. His weathered face split into a grim smile. The fusion plant is running at 112% of rated capacity, Captain. The magnetic containment is holding, though I would not want to push it much further. The modifications are ready, but once we begin, there will be no going back. Sarah nodded. They had spent the last 3 weeks preparing for this moment, ever since they learned that the Zaltari had established a processing station in this sector where they were breaking down captured human colonies for slave labor. The Resilience wasn't just carrying refugees anymore. She was carrying something far more dangerous. Hope, backed by desperate ingenuity. Mr. Torres, Sarah called to the weapons officer, a young woman who had learned to fire naval artillery by watching her family die under Zaltari bombardment. Are our special packages ready for delivery? Elena Torres was barely 22, but her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had seen too much death too young. She nodded crisply. All 6 torpedoes are loaded and ready, Captain. The warheads are armed and the targeting solutions are locked in. The torpedoes weren't standard military ordnance. They couldn't afford standard military ordnance. Instead, they were fusion bombs built from salvaged reactor cores, wrapped in sensor-defeating stealth coating that Petrov had somehow synthesized from asteroid mining equipment and sheer bloody-mindedness. Each one carried enough destructive power to crack a small moon, and they were completely illegal under 17 different galactic conventions. Commander Zektar, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the static-filled connection. I'm going to explain something about Deathworlders that your intelligence files probably missed. We don't just come from a dangerous planet. We are dangerous because our planet tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We learned to survive ice ages and supervolcanoes, meteor impacts and mass extinctions. We learned that when something bigger and stronger tries to destroy you, you don't just fight back. You evolve. The Zaltari commander's expression shifted slightly, uncertainty flickering across his alien features. Around the bridge of the Resilience, Sarah's crew was moving with practiced efficiency, their hands dancing across controls as they prepared for what was either going to be a legendary victory or a spectacular suicide. You are bluffing, Zektar said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. One converted freighter cannot threaten 17 military vessels. Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You're right, Commander. One converted freighter can't threaten 17 military vessels. But we're not just a freighter anymore. Mr. Rage, Webb, open a channel to all human survivors in this sector. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you corner a Deathworlder. The communications board lit up with incoming signals as dozens of ships across the sector began responding to Sarah's call. They weren't warships. They were cargo haulers and mining vessels, passenger liners converted to refugee transports, even a few pleasure craft that had somehow survived the initial bombardments. But each one carried the same cargo. Human survivors who had chosen to fight rather than fade quietly into extinction. This is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Defiant Hope, came a voice over the speakers, followed by others in quick succession. Mining vessel Iron Will standing by. Transport New Horizon, ready for action. Salvage ship Phoenix Rising, at your command, Captain Chen. One by one, 23 vessels dropped out of hiding among the asteroids and debris fields, their engines flaring to life as they converged on the Zaltari formation. They were a mismatched fleet of survivors and refugees, held together by determination and desperation, but they moved with the coordination of a pack that had learned to hunt together. Zektar's expression shifted to something approaching alarm as his sensors registered the new contacts. Impossible. Our intelligence indicated no organized human resistance in this sector. Your intelligence, Sarah said, her voice cold as vacuum, failed to account for one crucial factor. Humans don't just survive. We adapt, we learn, and we remember every single world you've burned, every family you've destroyed, every child you've sold into slavery. Today, you're going to learn why the galaxy classified Earth as a death world. The Resilience shuddered as her engines reached full power, the modified fusion plant singing a high-pitched whine that vibrated through the hull. Around them, the other human ships were accelerating into attack formation, their crews speaking in the calm, professional tones of people who had faced death so many times that it become just another enemy to overcome.
"All ships, this is Chen," Sarah announced over the fleet frequency. "Remember what we're fighting for.
Remember the worlds we've lost and the people we couldn't save. But most importantly, remember what we're going to build from the ashes. Today, we stop running. Today, we start taking our galaxy back." The Zaltari ships opened fire first, their plasma cannons filling space with deadly energy that could vaporize unshielded metal in seconds. But the human ships didn't fight like the orderly formations that the aliens expected. They scattered like a school of fish, each vessel following its own unpredictable course while maintaining perfect coordination through encrypted communications that the Zaltari couldn't break. The Resilience jinked hard to starboard as plasma bolts streaked past her hull, close enough to superheat the outer armor plating. Sarah gripped the arms of her command chair as the ship's artificial gravity struggled to compensate for the violent maneuvers, but her eyes never left the tactical display where the battle was unfolding in real time. 3 Zaltari interceptors had broken off from the main formation to pursue the smaller human vessels, their superior speed and firepower making them confident of quick kills. They were wrong. The mining ship Iron Will detonated its entire cargo of refined metallic hydrogen just as the aliens closed to point-blank range, creating a brief star in the darkness of space that consumed all 3 ships. Captain Rodriguez aboard the Defiant Hope was using his ship's cargo bay as a massive shotgun, ejecting shipping containers filled with metal debris at precise intervals to create clouds of shrapnel that the Zaltari ships flew into at high velocity. Each impact stripped away armor plating and damaged sensors, slowly degrading their effectiveness. But it was the Resilience that drew the most attention as Sarah's crew put their months of planning into action. The ship's modified engines weren't just providing propulsion anymore, they were creating a localized distortion in spacetime that made targeting solutions nearly impossible to maintain. While the jury-rigged weapon systems fired patterns of energy and projectiles that seemed random but followed mathematical principles that the Zaltari couldn't predict. Torpedoes away, Torres reported as the Resilience executed a spiraling attack run that brought her within range of the Zaltari flagship. Time to target, 47 seconds. Zektar's ship immediately began evasive maneuvers, its sophisticated point defense systems tracking the incoming warheads. But Petrov's stealth coating was working better than they had hoped, and the Zaltari sensors couldn't get a clean lock on targets that appeared and disappeared like ghosts in their tracking systems. "All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessel," Sarah ordered. "We take out their coordination, and the rest becomes a lot easier." The human fleet responded with a coordinated assault that defied every tactical doctrine in the galactic databases. Instead of maintaining formation integrity, they attacked from 17 different vectors simultaneously, each ship using its unique capabilities to maximum advantage. A passenger liner used its powerful communications array to jam enemy sensors, while cargo haulers used their massive engines to ram damaged alien ships, and converted mining vessels fired streams of superheated metal that could cut through military armor like tissue paper. The first of Sarah's fusion torpedoes detonated against the flagship shields, creating a bloom of nuclear fire that briefly outshone the system's star. The Zaltari ship shuddered but held together, its advanced defensive systems absorbing most of the blast energy. But the second torpedo struck 3 seconds later, then the third, each detonation weakening the shields, until the fourth torpedo broke through and impacted directly against the hull. The explosion tore through 6 decks of the Zaltari flagship, venting atmosphere and crew into the vacuum, while secondary explosions rippled through the ship's internal systems. But even damaged, it was still dangerous, its remaining weapons firing in all directions as damage control teams worked frantically to restore power to critical systems. "Captain," Webb reported, his voice tight with concentration, "I'm picking up transmissions from the flagship. They're calling for reinforcements."
Sarah's blood ran cold.
Reinforcements would mean more Zaltari ships, probably a full squadron, or even a battle group. Her ragtag fleet could handle 17 interceptors, but against a proper military force, they would be swept aside like debris. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. "Unknown, Captain. The transmissions are heavily encrypted, but based on standard Dominion response protocols, I'd estimate between 6 and 12 hours. 6 hours. Sarah looked at the tactical display, where her ships were still engaged in their deadly dance with the remaining Zaltari vessels. They had destroyed 7 of the 17 interceptors, but the cost had been severe. 5 human ships were gone, vaporized by alien weapons or lost to critical system failures. Another 4 were badly damaged, limping along on emergency power while their crews performed desperate repairs. "Captain Chen," came a voice over the emergency frequency. It was Captain Rodriguez, and his ship was clearly in trouble. "The Defiant Hope has lost main power. We're running on backup systems only. I don't think we can maintain combat effectiveness much longer." Similar reports were coming in from across the fleet. The human ships had fought with courage and ingenuity, but they were converted civilian vessels facing military hardware. They were winning, but they were bleeding out in the process. "All ships," Sarah announced, making the hardest decision of her command, "begin withdrawal to Rally Point Delta. We've accomplished our primary objective. It's time to preserve what we've built. Belay that order," came a new voice over the communications channel. It was Elena Torres, but she wasn't speaking from the weapons station anymore. She was in the torpedo bay, and her voice carried the calm finality of someone who had already made peace with their fate. "Torres, get back to your station immediately," Sarah commanded. "Sorry, Captain, but I've got a better idea. The last 2 torpedoes are armed and ready, but I can increase their yield by manually overriding the safety systems. It'll give us enough firepower to finish the flagship, but someone needs to stay here to make sure the timing is right." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, understanding what her young weapons officer was proposing. It was suicide, plain and simple, but it might save the rest of the fleet.
Elena, there has to be another way.
There is no other way, Captain. You know it, and I know it.
But this isn't just about the here and now. This is about showing the galaxy that humans don't just roll over and die when someone tries to exterminate us. This is about giving our people time to build something better. The Resilience shook as another plasma bolt grazed her hull, and Sarah could hear the damage control alarms echoing through the ship. Around them, the battle was reaching its climax, with human and alien ships locked in deadly embraces as they fought at point-blank range. "Torres, if you do this, you'll be remembered. I promise you that. Just make sure it counts for something, Captain. Make sure the story gets told." Sarah opened the fleet communication channel one final time. "All ships, this is Chen. Elena Torres, weapons officer aboard the Resilience, is about to show the Zaltari why they should never have underestimated humanity. I want everyone to witness this moment and remember it. When we rebuild our civilization, when we reclaim our place in the galaxy, we're going to do it in honor of people like Elena, who chose to stand and fight when surrender would have been easier."
The young woman's voice came over the speakers one last time, steady and unafraid.
"This is for New Sydney, for Earth, and for every human they thought they could just erase. Tell the galaxy that Elena Torres was here, and she didn't go quietly." The 2 fusion torpedoes detonated simultaneously against the Zaltari flagship's damaged hull, their combined yield enhanced by Torres's modifications to create a miniature supernova in the darkness of space. The explosion consumed the entire ship in seconds, expanding outward in a sphere of nuclear fire that forced the surviving human vessels to retreat to safe distance. When the light faded and the sensors cleared, the flagship was gone, taking Commander Zektar and 300 Zaltari crew members with it. The remaining alien interceptors, demoralized by the loss of their command ship and facing an enemy that seemed to defy every tactical prediction, began withdrawing from the engagement zone. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Resilience, looking at the tactical display that showed the aftermath of their victory. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. 9 human ships lost, including some of the finest people she had ever served with. But they had also proven something important, something that would echo across the galaxy in the months and years to come. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity was not defeated. And most importantly, humanity was not going to disappear quietly into the void. "All ships," Sarah announced, her voice carrying across the communication channels to reach every survivor in their small fleet. "Set course for the rendezvous coordinates. We have a galaxy to rebuild, and this is only the beginning." As the human ships limped away from the battlefield, their hulls scarred by combat but their spirits unbroken, none of them noticed the small probe that had been observing the battle from the edge of the system. The probe belonged to the Kepler Trade Consortium, a neutral organization that sold information to the highest bidder throughout the galaxy. Within hours, reports of the engagement were spreading across the communication networks that connected thousands of worlds. The story grew with each telling. A small fleet of human survivors had engaged and defeated a Zaltari hunting pack, using tactics and weapons that defied conventional military doctrine. The details varied, but the core message remained the same. The humans were still fighting. and they were winning. In the great cities of the inner worlds, where alien species debated policy and trade agreements, the news was received with skepticism and concern. A resurgent human military force could disrupt the careful balance of power that had kept the peace for decades. In the Outer Rim territories, where pirates and slavers preyed on the weak, the news was received with fear. If the humans were organizing again, their profitable hunting grounds might soon become battlefields. But in the hidden colonies and refugee camps scattered throughout the galaxy, where human survivors had been quietly rebuilding their lives, the news was received with something that had been rare since Earth's destruction: hope. The Deathworlder fleet had fired its first shots, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after the battle in the Kepler Nebula, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the cargo bay of what had once been a derelict orbital station, watching as her engineers worked to transform scrap metal and salvage components into something that the galaxy had never seen before. The station, designated Haven Alpha by its new human inhabitants, drifted in the shadow of a dead planet where an ancient civilization had once thrived, providing perfect cover for the growing fleet that now called it home. The transformation had been remarkable. When they first discovered the station, it was little more than a hollow shell, its original builders long dead and its systems powered down for centuries. But human ingenuity had a way of bringing dead things back to life, and now the abandoned structure hummed with activity as nearly 2,000 survivors worked around the clock to build their new base of operations.
Captain Chen called out Commander James Park, formerly of the Earth Defense Force and now Sarah's second-in-command. The delegation from Proxima Settlement just arrived. They're requesting permission to come aboard.
Sarah nodded, adjusting the modified uniform she wore, a patchwork combination of military dress codes from a dozen different human colonies. In the months since their victory over the Zaltari hunting pack, word had spread throughout the scattered remnants of human civilization. Ships arrived weekly, some carrying refugees seeking sanctuary, others bringing volunteers who wanted to join the fight. Each arrival brought new skills, new resources, and new stories of survival against impossible odds. The delegation from Proxima Settlement represented one of the largest surviving human colonies, a mining operation that had somehow avoided detection by hiding their operations inside an asteroid field that the Zaltari considered too dangerous to patrol. Their arrival marked a turning point in what was becoming known as the Deathworlder resistance. "Bring them to Conference Room Alpha," Sarah instructed, "and make sure they understand our operational security protocols. What we're building here could change the course of the war, but only if we can keep it secret." As Sarah made her way through the station's corridors, she reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate battle. The Resilience was still her flagship, but she was no longer alone. 14 ships now formed the core of what news reports were calling the Deathworlder fleet, each one modified and upgraded using technology that human engineers had developed by studying captured Zaltari equipment and adapting it to their needs. The conference room had been one of the first bases they restored, a circular chamber with holographic display capabilities that could project star charts and tactical information in 3 dimensions. As Sarah entered, she found herself face-to-face with 3 individuals who represented the political and military leadership of one of humanity's most successful hidden colonies. Director Maria Vasquez was a woman in her 50s whose weathered face spoke of decades spent managing the impossible logistics of keeping a colony alive in hostile territory. Beside her stood Colonel Robert Harrison, a career military officer whose unit had somehow escaped the destruction of the Earth Defense Force's 3rd Fleet. The third member of their delegation was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenobiologist whose research into Zaltari physiology had provided crucial intelligence about their enemies' weaknesses.
"Captain Chen," Director Vasquez began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. "We've come here to discuss a formal alliance.
Proxima Settlement has resources and expertise that could be invaluable to your operation, but we need to know that we're backing the right horse." Sarah gestured for them to take seats around the conference table, where a 3-dimensional map of local space showed the current positions of known Zaltari forces and suspected human settlements. Red indicators marked enemy strongholds, while blue dots represented confirmed human colonies. There were far more red than blue. "Director, I appreciate your directness," Sarah replied. "Let me be equally direct with you. What we're building here isn't just a resistance movement. We're laying the foundation for a new kind of human military force, one that can not only survive contact with superior alien technology, but actually defeat it in open combat." Colonel Harrison leaned forward, his experienced eyes studying the tactical display. "With respect, Captain, that's a bold claim. The Zaltari have conquered 47 star systems. Their military technology is centuries ahead of anything humans have ever developed. How exactly do you propose to level that playing field?" Sarah smiled, pressing a control that shifted the holographic display to show detailed schematics of ship modifications that her engineers had been developing. The designs were unlike anything in the standard databases, combining human engineering principles with alien technology in ways that created entirely new capabilities. Colonel, you're thinking in terms of conventional warfare, where superior technology automatically translates to battlefield advantage. But humans have never been conventional. Dr. Tanaka, your research into Zaltari biology has revealed some interesting vulnerabilities, hasn't it? The xenobiologist nodded, her excitement evident as she began explaining her discoveries. The Zaltari evolved on a world with much lower gravity and a more stable magnetic field than Earth. Their nervous systems are extremely efficient but also highly specialized, which makes them vulnerable to certain types of electromagnetic interference. More importantly, their military doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority, which means they've never had to develop the kind of adaptive tactics that humans take for granted. Show them the Pandora project, Sarah instructed her aide, who brought up a new set of schematics that made the Proxima delegation's eyes widen in surprise. The Pandora project represented the culmination of months of research and development by the station's best engineers and scientists. At its core was a simple but revolutionary concept. Instead of trying to match Zaltari technology directly, human ships would use the aliens' own technological superiority against them. This is impossible, Colonel Harrison breathed. Studying the technical specifications, you're talking about building ships that can hack into enemy systems in real time during combat. The processing power alone would require quantum computers that we simply don't have. We don't have them yet, Sarah corrected. But we've identified 17 Zaltari supply convoys that carry the components we need. And we've developed a strategy for capturing those components intact. The plan that Sarah outlined over the next hour was audacious even by human standards. The Deathworlder fleet would conduct simultaneous raids on multiple Zaltari supply lines, using their superior knowledge of local space and their ability to operate in hostile environments to strike at targets that the enemy considered secure. Each successful raid would provide not only the advanced technology they needed but also intelligence about Zaltari operations throughout the sector. The risks are enormous, Director Vasquez observed. If even one of these raids fails, the Zaltari will realize that humans are operating in organized units again. They'll send battle fleets to hunt us down. They're already hunting us, Sarah pointed out. The difference is that now we're going to be hunting them back. Director, the choice isn't between safety and danger. The choice is between dying slowly as scattered refugees or fighting back as a unified force. Your settlement has survived by hiding, but how long can that last? How long before their sensors improve enough to detect your mining operations? How long before some other alien species decides that humans are too dangerous to leave alive? The room fell silent as the implications of Sarah's words sank in. The Zaltari Dominion had declared humans extinct as a species, but that wasn't just propaganda. It was a statement of intent. As long as humans remained scattered and weak, other species might tolerate their existence as curiosities or sources of slave labor. But any sign that humanity was rebuilding its military capability would trigger a coordinated response from multiple alien governments. Tanaka was the first to speak. Captain, my research suggests that the Zaltari leadership views human survival as an existential threat to their expansion plans. They've studied our history, our wars, our technological development patterns. They know what humans are capable of when properly motivated. Which is why they tried to exterminate us completely, Colonel Harrison added grimly. And why they'll try again if they discover how many of us are still alive. Sarah nodded. Exactly. We're living on borrowed time, and that time is running out. The question is whether we use it to prepare for inevitable defeat or to build something that can actually win. The discussion that followed lasted well into the station's artificial night cycle, as the Proxima delegation grilled Sarah and her staff about every aspect of their operational plans. The technical challenges were enormous, the resource requirements staggering, and the probability of success was difficult to calculate. But by the time the meeting ended, all three visitors had reached the same conclusion. Proxima Settlement is prepared to commit to a full alliance, Director Vasquez announced. We'll provide mining equipment, rare elements, and technical expertise, but we have conditions. Sarah raised an eyebrow, waiting for the terms. First, any technology developed through this collaboration must be shared equally among all human settlements. Second, military operations must be conducted in a way that minimizes the risk to civilian populations. And third, we need a guarantee that this isn't just about revenge against the Al-Saltari.
We need to know that you're building something that can protect human civilization in the long term. Agreed on all counts, Sarah replied without hesitation. But I have a condition of my own. This alliance works both ways. If the Deathworlder fleet calls for support, Proxima Settlement responds. No exceptions, no delays, no political considerations. We're all in this together. Or we're all dead separately. The formal alliance was signed using an old Earth tradition that none of them had practiced in years, with handshakes and verbal oaths that carried more weight than any written contract. As the Proxima delegation prepared to return to their ships, Colonel Harrison pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. Captain, I've fought in 3 major campaigns against alien forces, and I've seen what happens when humans try to match superior technology with conventional tactics. We lose, and we lose badly. But what you're proposing isn't conventional, and it isn't safe. Are you absolutely certain that this is the right approach? Sarah looked out through the observation port at the growing fleet of modified ships that filled the space around Haven Alpha. Each vessel told a story of loss and survival, of humans who had refused to accept extinction even when the entire galaxy had written them off as dead. They weren't the sleek warships that humanity had once built in the orbital yards around Earth, but they had something that those ships had never possessed. They had been forged in the fires of desperation and tempered by the absolute certainty that there was no alternative to victory. Colonel, Sarah said quietly,
I've learned something about humans in the past few months.
we're not at our most dangerous when we're confident and well-equipped. We're at our most dangerous when we've lost everything and have nothing left to lose. The Zaltari destroyed our worlds, scattered our fleets, and tried to erase us from the galaxy. They thought that would make us weak. They were wrong. It made us something they've never encountered before. Humans with absolutely nothing to lose and everything to fight for. As the Proxima ships departed from Haven Alpha, carrying with them the plans for the first phase of what would become known as the Deathworlder campaign, Sarah returned to her command center to oversee the final preparations for their first major operation. The raid on the Zaltari supply convoy was scheduled for 72 hours, and there were still countless details to coordinate. Commander Park was waiting for her with the latest intelligence reports from their network of scouts and observers. The information was encouraging. The target convoy was following its predicted route, its escort was lighter than expected, and there were no signs that the Zaltari suspected any human activity in the area. Captain, Park reported, all strike teams are ready for deployment. The Resilience, Iron Determination, and New Defiance will form the primary attack group, while the support vessels maintain overwatch from the designated rally points. If everything goes according to plan, we should be able to disable the convoy's ships and extract the quantum processing cores before enemy reinforcements can respond. Sarah studied the tactical plans one final time, looking for flaws or oversights that could compromise the mission. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. If they were detected too early, the convoy would call for help and the element of surprise would be lost. If they failed to disable the enemy ships quickly enough, the Zaltari would have time to destroy the technology that the humans needed. If they lingered too long at the target site, enemy reinforcements would arrive and trap them in hostile space. Any word from our other targets? Sarah asked, referring to the additional raids that would be conducted simultaneously across the sector. Captain Martinez reports that the Centauri strike group is in position and ready to begin their approach. Commander Singh's team has successfully infiltrated the shipping lanes around Kepler Station and is prepared to intercept their assigned convoy. All teams are maintaining communication silence as ordered. Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar mixture of anticipation and dread that preceded every major operation. In 3 days, the Deathworlder fleet would announce its presence to the galaxy in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. They would either establish themselves as a legitimate threat to Zaltari expansion, or they would be destroyed in the attempt. Commander, initiate the final phase of pre-mission preparations. I want all ships checked and double-checked, all crew members briefed on their emergency procedures, and all equipment tested to full specifications. In 72 hours, we're going to find out whether everything we've built here was worth the effort. As the station's activity level increased to maximum, with technicians and engineers working around the clock to complete final modifications to the strike ships, Sarah found herself in the observation lounge that had become her unofficial retreat. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the stars that had once been humanity's destination and were now their battleground. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humans had reached for the stars with dreams of exploration and peaceful expansion, only to discover that the galaxy was already occupied by species that viewed them as competitors to be eliminated. But perhaps that was exactly what humanity needed. Not a peaceful expansion into empty space, but a trial by fire that would forge them into something stronger than they had ever been before.
Her contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Elizabeth Foster, the station's chief medical officer, and one of the few remaining experts in human psychology under extreme stress conditions. Foster had been studying the psychological profiles of the fleet's crew members, trying to understand how humans could maintain effectiveness in the face of seemingly hopeless odds. "Captain," Foster said, settling into the chair beside Sarah's, "I've completed my analysis of crew psychological evaluations, and I think you should see the results. They're unlike anything I've encountered in the literature." Sarah accepted the datapad, scanning through charts and graphs that tracked everything from stress hormone levels to cognitive performance metrics. What she saw defied conventional understanding of human psychology under extreme conditions. "According to these readings," Sarah observed, "our people should be experiencing massive psychological breakdown. The stress levels indicate chronic exposure to life-threatening situations. The isolation factors suggest severe social disruption, and the uncertainty metrics are off the charts. But their performance evaluations are consistently above average." Dr. Foster nodded. "That's exactly what puzzles me. By every conventional measure, these people should be suffering from severe PTSD, depression, and anxiety disorders. Instead, they're showing enhanced problem-solving capabilities, improved group cohesion, and what can only be described as adaptive psychological resilience." "What's your theory?" "I think we're witnessing human evolution in real time," Foster said carefully. "Not biological evolution, but psychological and social evolution. These people have been forced to adapt to circumstances that would have destroyed our ancestors, and they've not only survived, but actually thrived. They've developed new psychological frameworks for dealing with existential threats, new social structures for maintaining group cohesion under extreme stress, and new cognitive patterns for processing information and making decisions in life or death situations." Sarah considered the implications of Foster's research. If humans were actually adapting to become more effective under conditions of extreme adversity, then the Zaltari had made a fundamental mistake in their approach to human extermination. Instead of destroying humanity's capacity for resistance, they had created evolutionary pressure that was making humans more dangerous than ever before. "Doctor, I want you to expand your research to include the crews of every ship in our fleet. If we can understand how humans are adapting to these conditions, we might be able to accelerate the process, or apply it more systematically." "Already ahead of you, Captain. I've been in contact with researchers at Proxima Settlement and 3 other hidden colonies. We're comparing data across multiple human populations that have survived under different types of pressure. The preliminary results suggest that humans exposed to technological superiority develop enhanced creative problem-solving abilities, while humans exposed to direct physical threats develop improved tactical thinking and group coordination." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Commander Park's voice carried the tension of someone delivering critical intelligence. "Captain Chen to the command center immediately. We've received an encrypted transmission from one of our deep space scouts. The Zaltari are moving a battle fleet into position, and their projected course will bring them directly to our operational area." Sarah was on her feet and moving before Park finished speaking, her mind already shifting into combat mode as she calculated response options and contingency plans. The timing couldn't be worse. Their strike groups were already committed to their approach routes, and aborting the mission now would sacrifice months of planning and preparation. The command center was bustling with activity as intelligence officers worked to decode and analyze the incoming data. The main display showed a 3-dimensional representation of local space, with the projected movements of both human and Zaltari forces. The enemy fleet was substantial, 12 heavy cruisers and at least 30 escort vessels, more than enough firepower to destroy every human ship in the sector. "How long until they reach our operational area?" Sarah asked. "Best estimate is 6 days, Captain. But there's something else. The fleet composition and movement patterns suggest this isn't a random patrol. They're moving with the kind of precision and coordination that indicates a specific target." Sarah studied the display, her experienced eye picking out the details that confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't a hunting expedition or a routine patrol. This was a deliberate military operation designed to eliminate a known threat. Somehow, the Zaltari had discovered the existence of the Deathworlder fleet. "All ships, this is Chen," Sarah announced over the fleet communication channel. "We have a situation that requires immediate response. All strike group commanders report to the command center for emergency briefing. All other vessels prepare for immediate departure from current positions." As her senior officers gathered in the command center, Sarah realized that the next few hours would determine whether the Deathworlder fleet survived its first major test or whether humanity's attempt at organized resistance would end before it truly began. The stakes had just been raised beyond anything they had planned for, and their only choice was to adapt or die. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were very good at adapting. The emergency briefing in Haven Alpha's command center lasted exactly 17 minutes, but those 17 minutes would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. As Captain Sarah Chen outlined the situation to her senior officers, a plan began forming that would transform a desperate defensive action into something that military historians would later classify as one of the most audacious strategic gambles in recorded history.
The Zaltari battle fleet isn't just hunting us, Sarah explained to the assembled commanders, her voice carrying the calm authority that had held the fleet together through 6 months of running battles.
Intelligence analysis indicates they're conducting a systematic sweep of this entire sector, which means they have specific intelligence about human activity in this area.
Someone talked, someone was captured and broken, or someone got careless with communication security. Commander James Park stood at the holographic display, manipulating the three-dimensional tactical map to show the projected movement patterns of the enemy fleet. The Zoltari formation was impressive. 12 heavy cruisers arranged in a classic search-and-destroy pattern, with 30 escort vessels providing overlapping sensor coverage and rapid response capability. It was exactly the kind of force that conventional military doctrine would use to eliminate a known rebel base. "Captain," interrupted Commander Elena Martinez, the former merchant marine officer who now commanded the Centauri strike group, "my ships are already committed to the convoy raid. We're less than 18 hours from our target, and aborting now would waste months of intelligence gathering and preparation. The same applies to all our strike groups," added Commander Rajesh Singh, whose background in asteroid mining had made him an expert at operating in dangerous and unpredictable environments. "We've positioned our forces based on the assumption that we had at least a week before any major Zaltari response. If we pull back now, we lose everything we've worked toward." Sarah studied the faces of her commanders, seeing the same calculation in their eyes that she was running in her own mind. The conventional response would be to abort all ongoing operations, scatter the fleet to predetermined safe zones, and hope that the Zaltari search would miss their hidden bases.
It was the smart choice, the safe choice, and the choice that would guarantee their slow extinction as an effective fighting force.
What if we don't run? Sarah asked quietly, her words cutting through the tactical discussions like a blade through cloth.
What if we use their certainty against them? The room fell silent as the implications of her question became clear. Commander Park was the first to speak, his voice carefully controlled. "Captain, are you suggesting that we engage a full Zaltari battle fleet with our current forces? The odds would be impossible," Sarah finished. "By every conventional calculation, we would be destroyed within minutes of opening fire. But conventional calculations assume conventional tactics, and there's nothing conventional about what we're building here." Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who had arrived from Proxima Settlement aboard the research vessel Scientific Method, leaned forward in her chair. "Captain, my studies of Zaltari psychology suggest that their military doctrine is based on overwhelming superiority in direct combat. They've never encountered an enemy that refused to engage on their terms. Their tactical frameworks simply don't account for adversaries who use the environment itself as a weapon." The environment. Sarah looked at the stellar cartography display, studying the details of local space that her fleet had learned to navigate over months of careful exploration. The sector was a graveyard of ancient civilizations, filled with debris fields, unstable stellar phenomena, and the remnants of technological experiments that had gone wrong millions of years ago. It was exactly the kind of hostile environment that most spacefaring species avoided, which was why the humans had chosen it as their base of operations. "Mr. Petrov," Sarah called to the chief engineer, "how quickly can you implement the Pandora modifications to our entire fleet?" Dmitry Petrov's weathered face creased in thought as he calculated resource requirements and technical timelines. "With all available personnel working continuously, we could have basic Pandora packages installed on 14 ships within 72 hours. Full implementation would require another week, but the basic systems would be sufficient for limited field testing." "Do it," Sarah ordered. "All strike groups continue with their original missions, but we're adding a new objective. Each successful raid will now serve as a field test for our new capabilities." "Commander Martinez, your group will engage the convoy as planned, but you'll also demonstrate that human forces are operating in this sector. Make sure the Altari know exactly what hit them." Martinez smiled grimly. "You want us to break operational security deliberately? Leave a signature that they can't miss." "Exactly. The Zaltari fleet is here because they believe they're hunting scattered refugees and pirates. We're going to show them that they're wrong, and we're going to do it in a way that forces them to come to us on our terms. The plan that Sarah outlined over the next hour violated every principle of guerrilla warfare that her officers had been taught. Instead of avoiding enemy strength, they would deliberately attract it. Instead of maintaining secrecy, they would announce their presence.
Instead of preserving their forces for future operations, they would commit everything to a single decisive engagement.
Captain, Commander Singh said carefully, this strategy requires perfect execution across multiple simultaneous operations.
If even one element fails, the entire plan collapses. Then we don't fail, Sarah replied simply. Rajesh, your background is in asteroid mining, which means you understand better than anyone how to operate in unstable environments. The Kepler debris field has been avoided by every spacefaring species for the past 1,000 years because of the gravitational anomalies and radiation storms. How difficult would it be to navigate that field under combat conditions? Singh's eyes widened as he began to understand the scope of Sarah's plan. Extremely difficult for any conventional spacecraft. The gravitational eddies would tear apart anything larger than a frigate, and the radiation levels would fry most sensor systems within hours. But if you know the safe routes and have proper shielding, we've been mapping that field for 3 months, Sarah confirmed. We know every safe passage, every gravitational anchor point, and every spot where the radiation levels drop to manageable levels. More importantly, we know how to use the field's natural phenomena to mask our signatures and amplify our weapons. Dr. Foster, who had been listening to the tactical discussions with the analytical mind of someone trained to understand human psychology under stress, raised a concern that none of the military officers had considered. Captain, you're asking our people to execute a plan that defies every survival instinct they've developed over months of running from superior forces. The psychological stress of deliberately engaging a vastly superior enemy could cause catastrophic breakdowns in crew performance. Doctor, Sarah replied, you told me yesterday that our people have been evolving psychologically to handle exactly these kinds of impossible situations. This isn't about asking them to suppress their survival instincts. This is about trusting those instincts to find solutions that conventional thinking would never discover. The briefing concluded with the kind of detailed planning session that had become standard procedure for Deathworlder operations. Every ship captain received specific mission parameters, fallback positions, and communication protocols. Every engineering team received priority modification schedules and resource allocations. Every weapon system received targeting data and engagement rules that would maximize their effectiveness in the chaotic environment of the debris field. But beneath the technical details and tactical calculations, everyone in the room understood that they were committing to something far larger than a single battle. They were betting everything on the theory that human adaptability could overcome alien technological superiority, that creativity and desperation could triumph over centuries of military experience. As the commanders dispersed to prepare their ships and crews, Sarah remained in the command center with Park and Dr. Tanaka, finalizing the intelligence protocols that would make their plan possible. The success of their strategy depended on accurate, real-time information about enemy movements, capabilities, and intentions. Captain, Park said, reviewing the communication schedules, we'll need to maintain contact with all strike groups while they're conducting their raids, which means breaking radio silence at precisely the moment when secrecy is most critical. That's not a bug in the plan, James. It's a feature. We want the Zaltari to intercept our communications. We want them to know that human forces are conducting coordinated operations across multiple target sites. We want them angry, confident, and eager to demonstrate their superiority. Tanaka nodded approvingly. Psychological warfare based on their own cultural assumptions. The Zaltari view themselves as the apex predators of the galaxy. They've built their entire civilization on the concept of technological superiority, leading to inevitable victory. Suggesting that primitive humans are successfully challenging that superiority will trigger an emotional response that overrides their tactical judgment. The first confirmation of their strategy's effectiveness came 18 hours later, when Commander Martinez's strike group engaged the Zaltari supply convoy in the Rigel system. The battle was brief but spectacular, with human ships using their newly installed Pandora systems to hack into enemy defensive networks while simultaneously deploying weapons that the Zaltari had never encountered. The modified fusion torpedoes that Elena Torres had died perfecting were now standard armament across the fleet, but each ship had also been equipped with gravitational mines that could create localized space-time distortions and electromagnetic pulse generators that could disable alien electronics without destroying the valuable technology they contained.
Centauri leader to Haven Alpha, came Martinez's voice over the encrypted channel, carrying the excitement of someone who had just witnessed the impossible. Primary objectives achieved. We've captured intact quantum processing cores, navigation databases, and what appears to be a complete technical manual for their shield generators. Enemy casualties estimated at 90%. Human casualties, 0. 0 casualties. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the relief that came with successful operations.
But the real test was still ahead. The Zaltari battle fleet had altered course immediately upon receiving the convoy's distress signal, and they were now approaching the debris field with the kind of aggressive formation that indicated they were spoiling for a fight.
Commander Singh's raid on the mining facility in the Procyon system had been equally successful, with his ships capturing not only advanced technology, but also detailed intelligence about Zaltari military deployments throughout the sector.
The pattern was becoming clear. The aliens had been preparing for a major campaign against human survivors, with supply lines and staging areas positioned to support systematic genocide. All strike groups report mission success, Park announced as the final raid confirmations came through the communication network.
Total enemy losses, 47 ships destroyed or disabled. Total human losses, 3 ships damaged, requiring repair but capable of continued operations. Sarah studied the tactical display, watching as the Zaltari battle fleet entered the outer edge of the Kepler debris field.
Their formation was textbook perfect. Heavy cruisers arranged in a defensive sphere, with escort vessels providing overlapping sensor coverage and rapid response capability. It was exactly the kind of formation that would be devastatingly effective in open space against conventional opponents.
Captain, Dr. Tanaka reported from her position at the Xenobiology Station. I'm detecting massive electromagnetic emissions from the Zaltari fleet.
Their sensor arrays are operating at maximum power, and they're broadcasting challenge frequencies across all known human communication channels. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the angular features of Admiral Kreshtar, the Zaltari commander whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary even among his own people. His 4 eyes focused on the camera with predatory intensity, and his voice carried the harmonic undertones that indicated extreme emotional stress. Human vermin. The Admiral's translation came through the speakers with mechanical precision. You have made the mistake of revealing yourselves. This sector is now under total quarantine. All human vessels will surrender immediately or face annihilation. You have one of your time periods called minutes to respond. Sarah activated the fleet communication channel, broadcasting on frequencies that she knew the Zaltari would intercept.
When she spoke, her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had faced extinction and emerged stronger for the experience. Admiral Kreshtar, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Deathworlder fleet. We've received your surrender demand and we respectfully decline. However, we do have a counter-proposal. You and your ships leave this sector immediately, and we won't have to demonstrate why your species classified Earth as a death world.
The silence that followed her transmission lasted exactly 47 seconds. When Admiral Kreshtar responded, his voice had shifted to the harmonic frequencies that indicated barely contained rage. Impossible. Our intelligence indicates that human military capability was completely destroyed 18 months ago. You cannot have rebuilt effective forces in such a short time. Your intelligence was wrong, Admiral. But you're welcome to test that theory. Fair warning, though, this isn't going to go the way your tactical computers predict.
The Zaltari response was immediate and overwhelming. 12 heavy cruisers opened fire simultaneously, filling the space around Haven Alpha with enough destructive energy to vaporize a small moon. But Haven Alpha wasn't there anymore. The station had been evacuated and moved to a predetermined position deeper in the debris field, while the human fleet had dispersed to dozens of carefully mapped locations, where the natural phenomena of the graveyard would provide both cover and tactical advantage.
All ships, Sarah announced over the fleet frequency, implement Plan Prometheus. Show them what happens when you threaten a Deathworlder's family. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries, not because of its scale or its casualties, but because of the way it redefined what was possible when technological superiority met human desperation backed by scientific innovation. The Zaltari fleet advanced into the debris field with confidence born of centuries of unopposed expansion, their sensors probing for targets while their weapons systems prepared for the kind of devastating alpha strike that had destroyed countless enemies. But the debris field itself seemed to come alive around them. with gravitational anomalies suddenly shifting to trap ships in inescapable eddies while radiation storms erupted from nowhere to blind their targeting systems. The first Zaltari cruiser died when it encountered what appeared to be a simple asteroid, only to discover that the asteroid contained a fusion bomb with a yield equivalent to their own ship's entire armament. The explosion created a chain reaction that disabled 2 escort vessels and damaged the formation's sensor coordination. The second cruiser was destroyed by gravitational mines that had been positioned at specific points in the debris field, creating localized space-time distortions that crushed the alien ship like an eggshell. The third fell victim to electromagnetic pulse weapons that overloaded every electronic system aboard, leaving it drifting helplessly while human boarding parties captured its technology and crew. But it was the fourth cruiser that truly demonstrated the evolution of human warfare. The Resilience and 3 escort ships emerged from hiding behind a massive piece of ancient space station debris, their Pandora systems immediately hacking into the Zaltari ship's defensive networks. Within seconds, the enemy vessel's own weapons were turning on its escorts, while its navigation systems received false data that sent it directly into the path of a radiation storm that had been artificially intensified by human engineering.
"Admiral," Sarah broadcast as the Zaltari formation began to collapse under the weight of losses they couldn't understand or predict, "you're beginning to understand why we call ourselves Deathworlders. We don't just survive impossible conditions. We turn impossible conditions into weapons." The response came not in words but in action. The remaining Zaltari ships began a fighting withdrawal from the debris field, their formation tightening into a defensive posture that prioritized survival over offensive capability. They had entered the graveyard as conquerors and were leaving as survivors, bloodied by an enemy that had refused to fight according to the rules they understood. "Pursue and harass," Sarah ordered, "but don't get overconfident. We've won this engagement, but the war is just beginning." As the human ships emerged from the debris field to count their victories and assess their losses, the scope of their achievement began to become clear. They had engaged and defeated a Zaltari battle fleet using converted civilian vessels and improvised weapons, proving that human military capability was not only intact, but had evolved into something entirely new. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the depths of space, in hidden colonies and refugee camps scattered across 1,000 star systems, humans were receiving the news that would change everything. The Deathworlder fleet had won. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler Debris Field, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the Defiant Earth, the first purpose-built warship constructed by the reformed human colonial navy. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum viewport, she could see the sprawling shipyards of New Olympia, a hidden star system where human engineers were building a fleet that would have been impossible to imagine during their desperate early days of running battles and improvised weapons. The transformation had been remarkable. What began as scattered refugee ships and converted freighters had evolved into a sophisticated military-industrial complex that combined the best aspects of human engineering with captured alien technology and entirely new innovations born from the desperate creativity of a species that had learned to thrive under impossible conditions. The shipyards themselves were a testament to human adaptability, constructed inside the hollowed-out shells of ancient generation ships that had been discovered drifting in the interstellar void. "Captain Chen," announced Commander Park from the communication station, "we're receiving priority transmissions from all sector commands. The Galactic Council has officially recognized the reformed human colonial navy as a legitimate military organization and is requesting a formal diplomatic meeting." Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 6 months ago, the galaxy had written humanity off as extinct. Now, they were demanding to negotiate with the survivors they had ignored when genocide was being conducted on an industrial scale. The irony was not lost on her, but she had learned to be pragmatic about the politics of survival. "What's our current fleet strength?" she asked, though she knew the numbers by heart. Every ship, every weapon, every trained crew member represented months of careful planning and resource allocation. 47 combat vessels of various classifications, Park replied, calling up the detailed roster on his tactical display. 12 heavy cruisers built on modified Zaltari hull designs, 18 destroyers using our new hybrid propulsion systems, and 17 specialized vessels for reconnaissance and electronic warfare. Total crew complement, just over 12,000, including support personnel. 12,000 humans armed with ships and weapons that represented the cutting edge of military technology in the galaxy. It was a tiny force compared to the vast fleets of the major alien powers, but size had never been humanity's primary advantage. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for with the kind of tactical innovation and strategic thinking
that only came from a species that had been pushed to the very edge of extinction. The diplomatic request from the Galactic Council was just the latest development in a rapidly changing political landscape. News of human military resurgence had spread throughout the galaxy with the speed of light, carried by commercial communication networks and intelligence services that suddenly found themselves needing to revise their assessments of galactic power structures. The Zaltari Dominion, after losing nearly 30% of their 6th Fleet in a series of engagements with human forces, which is achieved by Re-D, had formally requested assistance from their allies in dealing with what they now classified as an existential threat to galactic stability. The request had been denied by 7 different species, who suddenly found themselves unwilling to commit military forces against an enemy that had demonstrated an alarming capacity for turning superior numbers and technology into tactical disadvantages. "Ma'am," interrupted Lieutenant Commander Torres from the intelligence station. Elena's younger sister had joined the fleet after the battle at Kepler, carrying on the family tradition of making impossible shots at critical moments. "We're receiving reports from our deep space reconnaissance networks. The Zephyrian Confederacy has withdrawn their forces from the border zones, and the Altarian Republic is reportedly conducting training exercises that look suspiciously like defensive preparations." Sarah studied the strategic display that showed the current positions of major alien military forces throughout the sector. The pattern was becoming clear. Species that had maintained careful neutrality during the human-Zaltari conflict were now positioning themselves to take advantage of whatever outcome emerged. Nobody wanted to be caught on the wrong side of a species that had gone from near extinction to major power in less than 2 years. "Captain," Dr. Tanaka called from her new position as Chief Science Officer, "I've completed my analysis of the intelligence data we captured from the Zaltari command vessel. The results are both encouraging and terrifying." Sarah made her way to the science station, where holographic displays showed detailed schematics of alien technology alongside comparative analysis charts that tracked human innovation rates. The data told a story of rapid technological advancement that defied conventional understanding of how civilizations develop new capabilities. "The encouraging news, Dr. Ogor," Tanaka began, "is that human technology has advanced more in the past 18 months than most species achieve in centuries. Our integration of captured alien systems with human engineering principles is producing innovations that neither side could have developed independently. We're not just matching alien capabilities anymore. In some areas, we're exceeding them."
And the terrifying news?
"The terrifying news is that we're doing it too fast. According to these projections, human technological advancement is following an exponential curve that has no historical precedent. We're violating every known rule about how long it takes for a civilization to assimilate and improve upon foreign technology." Sarah considered the implications of accelerated technological development. Rapid advancement was certainly beneficial for humanity's survival prospects, but it also carried risks that could be just as dangerous as extinction. Technologies developed under extreme pressure and desperate circumstances might have unforeseen consequences, and the social and psychological effects of rapid change could destabilize human civilization from within. "Doctor, what's your assessment of our current trajectory? Are we building a sustainable civilization or a house of cards that's going to collapse under its own weight?" Dr. Tanaka highlighted a section of her analysis that showed psychological evaluation data from across the human fleet and colonies. The numbers painted a complex picture of a species adapting to circumstances that challenged every assumption about human nature and capability. "Both," she replied honestly. "We're building something that's simultaneously more advanced and more fragile than anything humans have ever created. Our people are displaying psychological resilience and adaptive capacity that shouldn't be possible under these stress conditions. But they're also showing signs of fundamental changes in cognitive and social patterns that we don't fully understand." The discussion was interrupted by an urgent priority transmission from the bridge. Admiral Harrison, formerly Colonel Harrison, from Proxima Settlement, had recently been promoted to overall command of human military operations as the fleet grew beyond the capacity of any single officer to manage effectively. "Captain Chen to the war room immediately." Harrison's voice carried the urgency of someone dealing with a crisis that required immediate attention. "We've received intelligence that changes everything we know about the current situation." Sarah made her way through the corridors of the Defiant Earth, noting the confident efficiency with which her crew performed their duties. These were no longer refugees and survivors operating converted civilian vessels. They were professional military personnel aboard a purpose-built warship, trained in tactics and technologies that represented the cutting edge of human military science. The war room was filled with senior officers from across the fleet, their faces reflecting the kind of focused intensity that accompanied major strategic planning sessions. The central holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of known space with highlighted areas indicating recent intelligence developments. "People," Admiral Harrison began without preamble, "we have a problem." Our intelligence networks have discovered that the Zaltari Dominion has been providing detailed technical information about human capabilities to every major alien government in the galaxy. They're not just trying to build a coalition against us. They're trying to ensure that if they fall, they take us with them. The implications hit Sarah immediately. The technological advantages that had made human victories possible were based largely on the element of surprise and alien unfamiliarity with human tactical thinking. If that information was being systematically shared, future engagements would become progressively more difficult as alien forces adapted their tactics and technologies to counter human innovations. "What's the timeline on this intelligence sharing?" asked Commander Martinez, whose strike groups had been responsible for many of the fleet's most successful operations. "According to our sources," Harrison replied, "the first technical briefings were conducted 3 weeks ago. Full tactical analysis packages are scheduled to be distributed to all major alien governments within the next month. After that, we can expect coordinated responses, designed specifically to neutralize our operational advantages." Sarah studied the strategic implications while her fellow officers discussed response options and countermeasures. The situation was serious but not necessarily catastrophic. Human tactical innovation had always been based on adaptability rather than static technological superiority, and the psychological evolution that Dr. Foster and Dr. Tanaka had documented suggested that humans were becoming more effective at rapid adaptation under pressure. "Admiral," Sarah said, raising her voice to cut through the tactical discussions, "I think we're approaching this from the wrong direction. We're treating this intelligence sharing as a threat to our current capabilities. But what if we treat it as an opportunity to accelerate our next phase of development?" The room fell silent as the senior officers considered her words. Harrison gestured for her to continue. "The aliens are sharing information about what we were 6 months ago. They're preparing to counter tactics and technologies that we're already in the process of replacing. What if we let them prepare for the wrong war while we build something completely different?" Commander Singh leaned forward in his chair, his background in industrial engineering making him quick to see the possibilities. "You're talking about a fundamental shift in our entire operational paradigm. Instead of trying to protect our current advantages, we deliberately make them obsolete before the enemy can counter them." Exactly. The Prometheus project proved that humans can integrate and improve upon alien technology faster than any other known species. The question is, what happens if we stop trying to match alien capabilities and start building something that's purely human? Dr. Tanaka accessed her research files, projecting data that showed the psychological and technological trends they had been tracking across the human fleet. "Captain Chen is correct. Our analysis indicates that the most successful human innovations have come from abandoning alien design principles entirely and developing solutions based on human psychological and biological characteristics." The strategic planning session that followed lasted 14 hours, with breaks only for meal periods and essential crew changes. By the time they reached consensus on the new operational framework, Sarah realized that they weren't just planning the next phase of human military development. They were designing a form of warfare that would be as alien to the galaxy's established powers as their technology was to humanity. The Prometheus project was about learning to use their tools, Admiral Harrison summarized as the planning session concluded. "The new initiative will be about building tools that only humans can use effectively. We're going to create military capabilities that are so fundamentally tied to human psychology and biology that no other species can duplicate or counter them." The project that emerged from that marathon planning session was designated Atlas, named for the mythological figure who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. But unlike the Titan of legend, humanity wasn't bearing a burden imposed by others. They were choosing to carry the responsibility for their own survival and the protection of those who couldn't protect themselves. Atlas represented a fundamental philosophical shift in human military thinking. Instead of trying to out-alien the aliens, they would leverage the unique characteristics that made humans different from every other spacefaring species in the galaxy. The psychological resilience that had allowed them to survive genocide, the creative problem-solving that had turned improvised weapons into fleet-killing technologies, and the social adaptability that had forged unity from desperate refugees would become the foundation of military capabilities that no alien species could understand or counter. "Captain Chen," Admiral Harrison said, as the senior officers prepared to return to their ships and implement the new directives, "I'm assigning you to command the Atlas Development Program. You'll have access to our best engineers, scientists, and tactical specialists,
plus unlimited resources from our captured technology reserves.
Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with such assignments. The Atlas Project would determine whether humanity emerged from this conflict as a major galactic power, or whether their brief resurgence would be remembered as nothing more than an interesting footnote in the history of alien expansion.
Admiral, I'll need complete operational autonomy and the authority to implement experimental technologies without standard testing protocols. What we're building is going to be dangerous, not just to our enemies, but potentially to ourselves. You have it.
The entire future of human civilization may depend on what you accomplish in the next few months.
As Sarah prepared to return to her ship and begin the most ambitious project in human history, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 18 months ago, she had been the captain of a converted freighter carrying refugees and hoping to stay one step ahead of extinction.
Now she was tasked with building weapons and tactics that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The Deathworlder fleet had proven that humans could survive.
The Atlas Project would prove that they could thrive. And somewhere in the depths of space, in the hidden colonies and secret shipyards where human civilization was rebuilding itself, people were beginning to believe that their species might actually have a future worth fighting for. But first, they had to win the war that would determine whether that future was possible. And the next phase of that war was about to begin.